What if the heroes of Marvel were dropped into the world of DC? Which villains would they end up fighting? Would they even stand a chance? I'm about to cover a handful of the most popular and prolific Marvel heroes like Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Wolverine, and Spider-Man, and then break down who their new rogues gallery would be, as well as their arch-nemesis, and what their conflicts might look like. I promise there are some picks in here that will genuinely surprise you, but absolutely fit once you think about it. In these matchups, we're assuming that the heroes of DC are no longer present, so no Batman or Wonder Woman will drop in to help. These Marvel characters are completely on their own to acclimate to this new world and its villains. And if for some reason you don't like my matchups or think I should have picked different heroes or villains, let me know down in those comments. But if I see even one gooner comment about why you want to see Black Widow fight Catwoman, I am nuking the entire channel. Alright, let's get it. Tony Stark is the invincible Iron Man. While he has no metahuman abilities, he is one of Earth's mightiest heroes due to his incredible technological genius and multi-billion-dollar corporate empire, Stark Industries. That fuels his obsession with building and improving power armor, a full-body suit of metallic armor that grants him flight, enhanced strength and durability, as well as countless different weapon systems. Tony is a futurist with a gigantic ego, so his villains tend to be other corporate moguls, scientific rivals, or geopolitical enemies of the United States. Right off the top, my first thought for a DC villain is Lex Luthor. It makes sense, they're both billionaires, tech geniuses that frequently use power armor. Lex powers his with kryptonite, while Tony has his arc reactor. And I do think these two would clash somewhat frequently, but it's likely to be a one-way rivalry. Ultimately, Lex wouldn't have any interest in Tony. His ego is that huge. He only considers someone above humanity as his rival. It's why Lex never cares about Batman or Bruce Wayne. In his mind, they're just simple little mortals, and he would feel the same way about Tony. Lex can't and wouldn't serve as Iron Man's arch enemy. As a couple honorable mentions, Iron Man would definitely have a rivalry with Toyman, the insane toy maker that builds lethal playthings to commit acts of terror across Metropolis. He would definitely target Stark Industries, creating miniature Iron Man toys that attack civilians, and would be a great technological villain for Tony to topple. I think Tony would also fight Parasite pretty frequently, the Rudy Jones version, a Star Labs janitor that was given energy-absorbing powers and uses them to commit crime. A lot like Electro in No Way Home, Parasite would love to get his hands on the infinite energy of an arc reactor, and would pose a pretty big threat to Iron Man, whose suits can be sapped of their power with just a touch. It would be awesome to see Tony craft countermeasures, like decoy armors or a suit designed to absorb energy better than Parasite. After all, Tony is at his best when he is backed into a corner, which is what leads me to pick his real primary villain. I think Tony would get tangled up with the Court of Owls, the secret society of ultra-wealthy that have been pulling the strings of Gotham's underworld for hundreds of years. They would likely have a bone to pick if Stark starts up any serious philanthropy efforts in their city. I can see them sending a Talon to assassinate him, only for Tony to spend the next several months obsessively learning everything about them in an attempt to tear them down. But because Tony is far more brash than Bruce and less worried about the whole no-kill thing, I think he could make fairly quick work of the court at first, exposing each family involved one at a time. Most likely, the Court of Owls won't have much to deal with the incredible power of Iron Man, so their tactics will probably involve a smear campaign, dragging the Stark name through the mud and tanking Stark Industries' market value through backdoor deals and shady business practices. And as they wage war against one another, the court would take to hiring external assassins more on Iron Man's level of power, the likes of which would probably include Toyman and Parasite, just to name a few. In the end, I can see the Court of Owls pulling the right strings, so that if Tony takes them down for good, he will also lose access to his company and all of its resources, locking them in a dance for control for years to come. Shifting gears, the star-spangled man with a plan, Steve Rogers, is the only successful subject from the World War II Super Soldier program. Well, mostly. And after being frozen for decades, he was thawed out to become an Avenger, Captain America, a champion of old-school American values fighting the evils of a much more complicated modern world. The Super Soldier Serum gives him peak human physical abilities, paired with his extensive combat training, genius strategic mind, and an unbreakable shield of proto-adamantium. Captain America champions liberty as he fights assassins, political despots, and secret societies. Starting off, who would you pair a super soldier against other than another super soldier? What about Slade Wilson, Deathstroke? First of all, Captain America versus Deathstroke is a fight I need to see, specifically because I like to watch Canadians lose. All jokes aside though, this is a really cool matchup, and I think in his various missions around the world, Cap would run into Slade several times. Deathstroke is a mercenary who would probably be hired to take out any collection of peace convoys or politicians. I can see Cap having to stop him from killing a princess or a duke that's currently negotiating international relations. But I don't see this ever being a personal conflict between the two of them. In fact, I think Slade would have a twisted sort of respect for Steve, not unlike how Punisher views him, a great war hero. Slade is a cool rival, but not a nemesis. I think we get a little closer to that goal with Ra's al Ghul, head of the Demon, leader of the League of Assassins. Ra's is a pseudo-immortal eco-terrorist that wants to save the environment at the cost of the majority of human lives. I think it would be great to watch Steve deal with the League. He fights against secret societies and their ninja tactics. Those are always fun. He and Ra's would have a little bit in common. They both know what it feels like to live at different points in history and watch the world change around them. Ra's would probably try to convince Steve to join him, and I can see Cap being sympathetic to his cause. Of course, he would never sacrifice even a single human life, even for something noble. Steve outright rejects those sorts of utilitarian gambits, but watching him debate the topic with Ra's while the two duke it out would be awesome. I see Cap faring against Ra's about as well as Batman, able to physically best him, but uninterested in leading the League himself. Unlike Batman, Cap doesn't have to fight any desires to impose his will on the world. And besides, Steve is most fun to watch when his unshakable morality comes up against unique moral dilemmas. That's why he would be a great foil to Amanda Waller and her Suicide Squad. This was actually the issue at the heart of the James Gunn movie. Amanda Waller will always act in the best interest of the United States, regardless of how it affects innocent people in other nations, or how many human rights violations are involved. Once Cap catches wind of Task Force X and their shady operations, he would make it his personal crusade to knock them down a peg. I can see it now, Steve giving an impassioned speech to Amanda Waller about how America's ideals are empty if we don't respect the inherent rights of all people, all while calling her ma'am. Plus, we would get to see Cap fight against the entirety of the squad and its rotating roster. Deadshot, Peacemaker, Harley, Katana. And you know he would make it a point not to kill a single one of them just because he could. At the end of the day, I think Steve rooting out the corruption of the United States is way more interesting than seeing him fight her enemies, and Waller would end up being his #1 nemesis. Moving on, we have Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four, a group of space explorers exposed to radioactive cosmic waves. They were each transformed into something new and post-human. Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, is their leader. The smartest man in the universe, Reed was gifted with an elastic body that can stretch and contort into any shape imaginable, although his intelligence is truly his greatest asset, developing a machine or weapon for virtually any scenario. Reed is married to Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, who can create and manipulate force fields on top of her invisibility. Sue often acts as the responsible one of the group, tempering Reed's curiosity and Johnny's excitability. Speaking of, Johnny Storm is Sue's little brother and the Human Torch. When he flames on, he can generate heat comparable to the sun's surface, control flames, and fly at supersonic speeds. Finally, the heart of the group is Ben Grimm, the Thing. Ben has incredible strength and durability, all thanks to his bulky, stone-like body. Together, the Fantastic Four battle against cosmic-scale enemies and intergalactic threats, like Annihilus or the Molecule Man. And of course, their greatest enemy is Dr. Doom, the one man who rivals Reed's position as smartest in the universe. Now, in the DC world, I can see a few different people taking the place of Doom. The first and most obvious to me is Lex Luthor. I said earlier that Luthor would have little interest in Tony Stark, but Reed is a different animal. His intellect is actually greater than Lex's, and the fact that Reed is a metahuman would only infuriate Lex more. He would need to prove that his mind is greater, and that he can achieve more than Reed even without superhuman powers. I think the real threat Lex poses would be to Reed's social life. Lex would find a way to recruit Johnny to work for LexCorp, playing on the squabbles between the Fantastic Four, trying to get them to break apart as a group. And Reed, whose genius does not grant him particularly strong social skills, would fall victim to this fairly easily. I think he would take Lex's bait 9 times out of 10, and it would be up to Ben and Sue to pick up the pieces. But I think they would every time. The Thing has a pure heart and unshakable will, much like Superman, and Sue is emotionally intelligent enough to pick out when her family is being manipulated. I think Lex would like to be the Bane of the Fantastic Four, but he just doesn't stack up to Doom in that regard. Moving on to a threat from beyond the stars, Brainiac would be a perfect foil for the Fantastic Four. The alien superintelligence is perfect to pit against Reed's mind, and Brainiac's machine army is a great obstacle for the powers of Sue, Johnny, and Ben. I think Johnny in particular would be most effective in zipping around the planet to tear apart the invasion force, and Brainiac would try to target him to be used as a fuel source. Sue might be occupied crafting a force field over the Baxter building to keep the invasion force out, while Reed works on a solution. And because Brainiac locates sentient life across the entire universe only to destroy it, the team might find themselves traveling the cosmos looking for planets where he's likely to arrive and help defend them. I can see Brainiac as a long-term recurring villain for the Four, his countless drones across the universe an ever-present threat. But in terms of arch-nemesis, I needed to pick someone stronger, someone stranger. I think the First Family's greatest enemy would be the fifth-dimensional Chaos Imp, Mr. Mxyzptlk. Normally a Superman villain, Mixie is a higher-dimensional being that lowers himself to our reality to toy with the Man of Steel, constantly testing and challenging him to pass the time, always with the stipulation: if Mixie can be convinced to say his own name backwards, he'll relent and disappear. I think the Fantastic Four's combination of various superpowers, Reed's intelligence, Sue's intuition, Johnny's creativity, and Ben's heart, it all makes them uniquely qualified to deal with Mixie's shenanigans. And I think Mixie would be particularly interested in them. The cosmic storm that flooded the Four with cosmic rays, it imbued them with more than just run-of-the-mill superpowers. Reed even theorizes that Sue's abilities come from hyperspace, where the Celestials reside. If Mixie saw this third-dimensional woman using higher-dimensional powers, it would certainly grab his attention. And the Thing's durability is so ridiculous, I think Mixie would almost take it as a challenge to try and damage him. Combine that with Reed's arrogance and Johnny's smart mouth, and the Imp will never, ever let the Fantastic Four live long without seeing him again. Moving on, we have the master of the mystic arts, Sorcerer Supreme, Dr. Stephen Strange. Dr. Strange was one of the world's leading surgeons with an ego to match, but after an accident destroyed his hands, he learned humility as well as mysticism, training under the Ancient One to use his incredible mind for magic instead of medicine. Rising to the position of Sorcerer Supreme, Strange has access to countless collections of spells and incantations, drawing on the power of extra-dimensional entities like Sidorak and Watum. From his Sanctum Sanctorum, Strange defends our reality from threats, both magical and otherworldly. In the world of DC, he would likely face many of the threats that Dr. Fate or John Constantine normally dabble with, and probably some of the more magically inclined Wonder Woman villains too. I can see him clashing with Circe and the Lords of Chaos, but in terms of regular recurring villains, Morgan Le Fay is my first choice. Le Fay is the half-sister of King Arthur, and an incredibly powerful sorceress. She is immortal, and is an evolved form of human, the Homo Magi. She views all of humanity as simple playthings. I think she would take offense to a normal human like Strange claiming the title of Sorcerer Supreme, and fight both tooth and nail to take him down. LaFay is always playing with prophecies and legends, looking for new ways to gain power. She would be a great challenge for Steven's ability to find patterns and solve the mystery of her newest plan before she is actually able to achieve that ultimate power. Speaking of ultimate power and shifting hierarchies, I would love to see how Doctor Strange deals with the likes of Black Adam. In a world without Captain Marvel, there would be no one to stop this ancient Egyptian tyrant with the powers of Shazam. Black Adam is far less interested in spells and trickery than the typical villain Strange fights, instead using his powerhouse strength and speed to tear through opposition. Doctor Strange would likely be on the back foot when they first clash, and need to prepare specific spells to combat him. His strategy would probably include seeking out the wizard Shazam himself, and even claiming the power for himself if he can. And if not, perhaps Strange will find a way to communicate with the individual mythical figures behind that power: Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, etc. It's exactly the sort of problem-solving puzzle that the Doctor excels at. Ultimately, I think Teth Adam would be a very big threat to Strange, and they might even have some interesting conversations about their shared experiences, both being mortals that ascended to godlike power. But Black Adam isn't Strange's biggest enemy. That honor goes to the Scourge of Azarath, the mighty demon Trigon. Trigon fills a role very similar to Dormammu, the extraplanar demonic entity hell-bent on conquest and destruction. I can see Strange even using a portion of Trigon's power for a spell at one point, unaware of the danger he's toying with. And I know there aren't many other heroes in this version of the DC world, but I think it would make a lot of sense if Strange discovered a young Raven, the daughter of Trigon, and in protecting her from the Church of Blood, ends up taking her in as an apprentice and surrogate daughter. Strange is the exact person Raven needed in her life, with the knowledge to protect and teach her, and I think this would set up a fantastic rivalry between him and Trigon, their every fight essentially a world-ending custody battle of Raven and her soul. Trigon is essentially the bad ending. Every fight is Strange stopping him from entering our dimension, fighting through proxies. And if Trigon ever actually appears in our world, it will take all of Strange's years of preparation and cunning just to trap him again, because there's no way he could kill him. I think Trigon is the perfect endgame villain for Strange, his final nemesis. Hey, are you enjoying this video? Want to see me make more content like this? Maybe a DC Heroes versus Marvel Villains video? Then let me know by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts down in those comments. And if you want to talk to me directly, consider following me on Twitter, link in description, or joining my channel membership, where you can access my Discord, and even vote on future video topics. Man, that's a lot of great options I just gave you. I'll go ahead and give you an entire nanosecond to go do all of that. Done? Cool. On to our next hero. Next up is Logan, the best at what he does, the Wolverine. A mutant with regenerative abilities, Wolverine is more than 200 years old, can heal from any injury in minutes, and has enhanced senses of sight, hearing, and smell. His body includes retractable claws of bone that extend from his knuckles, upgraded tremendously when his entire skeleton was coated in adamantium, the indestructible supermetal. After escaping the Weapon X program, Wolverine has been an assassin, a mob boss, and a premier member of the mutant rights defending superhero team, the X-Men. Unlike someone like Cyclops or Professor X, Wolverine only lends himself to the mutant cause. And so, in picking a DC villain for him, we don't need to find someone whose villainy is rooted in prejudice. Logan is much more likely to tangle with an enemy who personally despises him, which is why I think Bane is a first great pick. Instead of Bane growing up terrified of a bat monster while locked in prison, I can see him hearing legends of the deadly Wolverine, the unkillable man that stalked the Americas for centuries. The Wolverine would become a symbol of his fear, the final wall for him to overcome. Instead of taking over Gotham and breaking the Bat, Bane would make it his mission to track down Logan and find a way to finish him off forever. I think these two would make great rivals. Bane's venom drug making him a great physical match for Wolverine, and he could use his genius intellect to concoct various plans to handle Logan's healing and adamantium bones. But he would need to be very careful because Logan will not hesitate to return the hostility and tear Bane to shreds. Deathstroke, I think, is a better villain for Wolverine than Captain America, mostly because they've both been assassins. They will both absolutely gut the other given the opportunity. And seeing how Deathstroke has taken out the entire Justice League on various occasions, I think he's more likely than Bane to find a more permanent solution for Logan's healing. It might even be possible for his Prometheum sword and armor to handle a few slashes from the adamantium claws before they get sliced apart. I really think Slade and Wolverine would hate one another, besides the fact that they're both Canadian, both assassins, ex-military, and use nigh unbreakable metal blades, and both have lost their own children in the past. They're like two sides of the same coin, and I think they would resent each other based on their similarities and how easy it would have been to become the other, which would fuel a pretty potent hatred. But the best pick for Wolverine isn't Bane or Slade. It's Vandal Savage. The very first metahuman of DC's world, he is an immortal from prehistory that lived to watch all of humanity's triumphs and failures. He has a regenerative healing factor and never ages. He's only different from Wolverine in that he's much older, and he views the rest of humanity as his playthings. Just like Wolverine's greatest Marvel villain, Sabretooth. I think Logan and Savage would have a very similar relationship. Once Vandal Savage learns about Logan, how he also can't die and has been around for centuries, he would take an interest with him. And when Logan is uninterested in joining his conquest over the rest of humanity, Savage would grow resentful, making it his personal vendetta to punish Wolverine and those he loves for the rest of time. I really think Wolverine would be challenged in his resolve, in his beliefs, every time he would come to blows with Savage, which is exactly what you want in an arch-nemesis. Smashing in is our next hero, the indomitable, the incredible Hulk. The psychological alter of genius physicist Bruce Banner, Hulk was born after the Doctor was irradiated in a gamma-wave explosion, his repressed hatred and rage given life in the form of the giant green beast. Only growing stronger and tougher the more angry he becomes, the Hulk's gamma radiation actually connects him to the One Below All, giving him an incredible healing factor and near immortality. Combined with the limitless cap on his strength, it makes him a peerless force to be reckoned with. Hulk villains are usually other giant bruisers, like the Abomination or Red Hulk, and have to be someone who can match his strength that's constantly increasing. So the first choice is the most obvious: Doomsday. The Kryptonian evolutionary experiment with retroactive immortality, Doomsday was powerful enough to kill Superman, and always comes back to life after being defeated, now adapted to the method of his previous loss. As an immortal, giant rage monster, Doomsday is perfect to pair against Hulk, and their fights would easily level entire continents. In a world without Superman, I can see Doomsday fixating on Hulk as the peak of evolution that he wants to overcome, and I think Hulk would appreciate an enemy he can constantly go all out against, testing his limits to see just how powerful he can really become. Since neither of them can really die, and they both would enjoy smashing the other to bits, I think these two would almost be frenemies. Hulk would stop Doomsday every time he tries to hurt innocents, obviously, but they would always be excited to fight one another. My second pick for recurring villain, another impossibly powerful threat, the android Amazo. Created by Dr. Ivo, Amazo uses absorption cell technology to mimic the abilities of any metahuman he encounters. Sort of like Rogue, he can steal powers and then use them as his own. I particularly like the version of Amazo from the DCAU Justice League cartoon, where he traveled the entire universe for years, absorbing powers from countless beings until he essentially became a god. I think he would make a great rival for Hulk. His numerous abilities like teleportation, super speed, phasing, matter manipulation, throwing it all at Hulk and watching him get angrier and angrier, overcoming it all with sheer strength. I don't think Hulk would enjoy fighting Amazo due to how crafty he can be with his powers, but Hulk would usually be the only one who could challenge him. I think Amazo would take a philosophical and psychological fascination with Hulk, able to copy his gamma powers, but unable to use them effectively since he can't tap into the very human emotion of rage, at least not like Bruce can. In the end, the one flaw would be the reason Hulk would always win. a Mazo just can't muster up the anger. Speaking of anger, my final pick for Hulk's ultimate DC archenemy is the blood magic sorcerer and leader of the Red Lanterns, Atrocitus. I originally thought that the Manhunters would be a great enemy for Hulk, the near-endless army of super-strong machines that try to take over the universe, but I think the Green Lantern Rogues gallery actually has a better pick, the Red Lanterns. Because they also worship at the altar of rage, the Red Lanterns would want more than anything to recruit Hulk into their ranks, and they would lash out harshly when he refuses. Now, yes, I do understand how stupidly strong Hulk would be with a red ring, and I think at some point he would probably even use one, but he would likely reject the offer at first and get pissed that they even asked. I think the idea that Hulk's lone anger, challenging the literal embodiment of the emotion, is such a cool concept. Hulk would take it as a challenge. Can I get angrier than anger itself? Yeah, probably. To Hulk, it would be a matter of pride to defeat Atrocitus, and Atrocitus would feel the same way. Losing to Hulk would imply he's not fit to be the leader of the Red Lantern Corps. These two would have such a palpable, never-ending beef. I think they are perfect arch-enemies. Thundering in next is the Norse god and mightiest of all the Avengers, Thor Odinson. Son of the All-Father Odin, Thor hails from Asgard, the realm of the gods, to defend Earth and the rest of Midgard from evil forces that would challenge it. Wielding his hammer Mjolnir, Thor has total control of lightning, thunder, and all related weather phenomena. He is an immortal god, thousands of years old. His veins literally flow with lightning just as much as they do blood. And after Odin enchanted Mjolnir, every time Thor picks it up, he proves he is worthy of his title, the God of Thunder. Because of his immense otherworldly power, Thor usually battles against cosmic powerhouses, or magical tricksters who can affect entire realms with their scheming and spells. Thor is almost always dealing with Loki, his trickster brother that constantly schemes for new ways to ascend to a place of power above mortals and even the other gods. There are a lot of tricksters and magical villains in DC, but I think the best analogy is someone rather unexpected: Sinestro. Leader of his own Lantern Corps, Sinestro is a power-hungry despot that relies on fear and underhanded tactics to snatch power for himself. Sinestro is almost always scheming something, from his original deceit against the Guardians of Oa to his world-conquering escapades as leader of the Sinestro Corps. He is a plague on the universe, one Thor would be adamant on stopping. The power of a Yellow Lantern ring is also quite formidable, and would make him an interesting matchup against Thor's incredible strength. And more interesting, it would show us all that Thor fears something. That has to be a very, very short list. I think, like Loki, Sinestro would constantly get smacked down by Thor, only to return again with some new plan. Ever since the War of Light, he keeps popping up with his fingers in something new, trying to bond with a new entity or enact a new coup, and Thor would be quick to catch on after a while. Another villain I expect Thor to clash with is Ares, God of War. In fact, I think most of Wonder Woman's rogues would make a good fight against Thor, but Ares is the best. Much like Thor, he has godly strength and can even call down lightning like his father Zeus. And beyond that, he often dips his hands into magical trickery. He can cast illusions like Loki, and can even see visions of the future, each of which would make him a tough fight for Thor. And their battles might even lead to a greater clash of wills, Mount Olympus versus Asgard, which would be fascinating to watch. But not as good as the next pick. Not even close. I think if Thor had an archenemy in DC, there is no greater choice than he who is Darkseid. Combining the worlds of cosmic and mythical DC, Darkseid is the new god of apocalypse, the arbiter of despair, and the end to all that will be. Darkseid is always looking for the anti-life equation, the grand formula that will allow him to remove free will from the universe and subjugate all living beings. Thor, who learned worthiness in humility, to stand up for mortals and defend the weak, would take very serious issue with this, and the two would likely have legendary, world-shattering clashes. Now, Thor is very powerful, but Darkseid is usually depicted as an even higher tier of strength, so I think that their battles would likely be very few and very important. sort of like Thor's big battles against Gore the God Butcher, where he only comes out victorious because all the other gods of the universe prayed to him. I think Thor would need to rally the support of some of the most powerful beings in DC before tearing Apocalypse to the ground. And to be honest, is there anything you want to see more than Thor deflecting Darkseid's Omega beams with Mjolnir? Yeah, I didn't think so. And finally, we've reached the end. Everybody's favorite webhead, the amazing, the spectacular, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. When teenage Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider, he was granted superhuman powers of strength, speed, durability, and the precognitive spider sense, which lets his body detect and react to incoming danger. Luckily, Peter was also a chemistry genius in the making. He concocted a specialized web fluid and wrist-mounted launchers that let him freely swing around the city, catch criminals just like flies, and web up falling debris, among countless other uses in his superhero life. As a friendly neighborhood hero, Spider-Man fights primarily street-level villains. He doesn't often tussle with Thanos or Galactus. So, the DC villains he would battle are likely to be more down-to-earth, but still deadly all the same. The first thought I think everyone has is the Joker, and I get this pick. He's got the similarities to Green Goblin. Cackling maniac, terrorizes the city, wears a colorful themed costume, he's got the works. And the Joker is deadly enough. He's nowhere near a physical match for Peter, but his schemes that put innocent lives in danger could easily stretch Peter thin. I just don't think that these two would jive well as enemies. When the Joker commits crimes, he's telling jokes. He wants to upset people with his unfathomably dark humor. But Spider-Man is a quipster himself. He would show up and just immediately hit Joker with 10 zingers and completely take the wind out of his sails, because he's actually funny. And the Joker would hate that. If you've ever seen the Batman Beyond movie, Return of the Joker, we see what happens when the Clown Prince of Crime meets a hero who tells jokes. It drives him up a wall. I think after their very first encounter, Joker would move his operation to whatever city Peter isn't in. Instead of the Joker, I think the Riddler would be a much better pick for a Spider-Man enemy. He would tackle Peter's jokey personality with gusto, excited to make him look stupid, always crafting a harder riddle every time he gets captured, and unlike Batman, Peter would not have much patience for the Riddler shtick, the constant barrage of puzzles testing his resolve and sanity. Plus, Nigma shares one of Peter's flaws, ego. Peter can be full of himself sometimes, so the Riddler specifically calling him out and testing him would really push him to be more humble and a better hero. Or, if he's having a particularly bad week, Riddler's tricks might turn Spider-Man down a darker path. Also, another Gotham scourge that would be a great match for Spider-Man, Poison Ivy. I think Peter would be sympathetic to her ecological worries, and this is Spider-Man, guys. His kryptonite is hot women. You just know he would end up entangled with her in some way or another, making their battles very messy, a clash of exes every time afterwards. And there are a few things I can think of that are more Spider-Man than that. But neither Ivy nor Riddler would be Peter's primary recurring enemy. I think that is a role that no one DC villain can fill. So, how about 6? The Rogues of Central City are the premier group of Flash villains, a collection of working-class criminals with a code of ethics, who make it their goal to become wealthy however possible, so long as they don't leave any bodies in their wake. While the Rogues have a revolving door of members, I think this sinister collection of 6 would include Captain Cold, Gorilla Grodd, Mirror Master, Captain Boomerang, Weather Wizard, and Pied Piper. Each with a unique ability or weapon, the Rogues are usually a threat to the Flash, but he can overcome them with his scientific mind in conjunction with his speed. Now, Spider-Man's powers are not on the Flash's level, but his ingenuity and creativity should more than make up for it. Crafting webs that don't shatter from Captain Cold's freeze ray, or a way to escape the mirror dimension, or avoid Gorilla Grodd's telepathic influence, all of these would challenge Spider-Man in exciting ways. But he would overcome it every time, and he would welcome it every time, because the Rogues have a code. They don't kill. They think the world is an unfair place and they want to get ahead, but not at the expense of others' lives. I honestly think Peter would respect the hell out of this, not only because it's a refreshing change of pace, but also because he can relate to their struggles. He's a poor kid himself. I think Peter would try his best to rehabilitate the rogues, giving them opportunities using his very few personal connections. And when they inevitably fall back into crime, it cripples Peter's personal life in the process. It may not be as heart-pumping as serial killers like Green Goblin or Carnage, but I think it's fitting that Marvel's only friendly neighborhood hero finds his way against DC's only friendly neighborhood criminals. Stay frosty.